Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. This is Morten from English, and I have the pleasure and honor to talk to Herve from Tonernews in the US. Good morning, Herve. How are you today?
I'm fine. Good morning to you, or good evening, I should say.
That is always the beauty of being really international, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I had the pleasure of talking to you a couple of months ago where we spoke about, I would say, almost the same topic as we're going to talk about today, because at that time you and I spoke about, let's say, the ban, the Uyghur ban that the US imposed on China and some of the subsidiaries of the huge manufacturer Ninestar company in China. Maybe you can bring the audience up a little bit. What has happened since we spoke on that matter?
Hi. Well, thanks for having me again. Since we spoke on that matter, the Chinese government, or should we say Ninestar, has sued the U.S. government for re-entry into the United States. And we've been staying on top of this news, carefully paying attention, and getting involved in getting our fans and our readers to know what is going on and what to do in case they do get reinstated. Something we're kind of all worried about.
And am I right if I think I read somewhere that originally it was Ninestar and a few selected named subsidiaries that were part of the ban from the China to the US, but it was extended to actually have all Ninestar entities banned under the same ruling. Is that true, or?
No, so 8 subsidiaries were banned, all of them with direct links to China. But companies, for example, like Lexmark, which is owned by Ninestar, is not banned. And another one is Static Control, which is here in North Carolina. They're not banned either. Mm-hmm. So there are some entities here in the U.S. still operating. I would say carefully operating. Mm-hmm. They must be watching over their back. They must know that they're being watched. But it's, at the end of the day, they're pitching printers and copiers and toners. So it is what it is.
One of our common friends, Ray from End of Day with Ray, one of the things that he talked about in some of the episodes, and because he has been relatively hard on Lexmark, as it's not a fully owned subsidiary from Ninestar, but it's a majority of the shares are owned by Ninestar. I was just wondering the consequences for let's say a US, let's say a corporate or a school or a governmental thing that is buying stuff from Lexmark. I mean, I take there could be parts inside the machine that could be made under the same, let's say, legislation that bans the import from other entities, right?
Well, unfortunately for Lexmark and Static Control, most of their products, especially all the chips that go into these printers and the toners and everything, still probably comes from China. I don't believe there's no manufacturing facility here in the U.S. to make the chips. And the shells for the clone toner or all that probably originates from China. So they, like I said, they have to tread carefully. We could tell by the articles that Lexmark releases that they're not completely comfortable with this Chinese affiliation. They're trying to distance themselves. And Ray, he's kind of like me. He wears his emotions on his sleeves, and he tells it like it is. And but he used to be employed by Lexmark, and they let him go. So this is, there's a little bit of revenge there. But I think, his patriotism is fair and good. We don't want to be spied on. We don't want to be taken advantage of. And, we want to warn people of the possibilities.
And as you said before we started the recording, which I paid a lot of attention to, was also that what of course, when you have an emotional relation to this case, is basically because of the unfair competitiveness that Ninestar and China and Chinese companies have done to the American industry. It has basically taken Americans out of work, basically closed businesses, and I think that we also spoke about that in a globalized world, that is sometimes happens, that shit happens. But if it's unfair and, let's say, illegal practices, then it's totally different, right?
Well, absolutely, and that's a good point. So basically, the problem with Ninestar and some of the others is, like I mentioned in the past, it's overproduction. And
Mm,
they do the same thing with electric cars in China. They build so many of them, they can't sell them, so they just store them in lots of 10,000 all over the country. And
mm,
they do the same thing with everything. They don't think about the environmental consequences. They don't think about their overproduction. They're just boom, get it out, and we'll deal with the rest later. And it's a very polluting practice. It's not environmentally friendly. And for our industry, which is all about remanufacturing and recycling, it was unfortunate to have them do this to the industry. However,
mm,
since they've been banned, things are turning around, and we can see by the product releases that we're getting from our remanufacturers that their production is up. So it's good, it's healthy at this point, and we definitely don't want them back in.
So that means basically that you can see a direct impact in the American industry for recycling of toner cartridges and recycling of these type of products. You can basically see an impact of the ban already now.
Oh yeah, I mean we could see it. When our advertisers send us new product releases, there's just more product being released. In the old
Mm,
days, they didn't release as many because Ninestar was basically, uh, slapping out these clone shells by the millions, and
mm,
it didn't give the remanufacturers time to get them from the recyclers to remanufacture them. Uh,
mm,
Ninestar, to this day, in other continents around the world, they'll take a Canon or HP product, and within a month of the OEM release, they're slapping out the clones in the millions.
mm, mm. So that basically means that they take intellectual rights from the OEMs, copy them, and bring a overcapacity of, let's say, counterfeited products into the market, and for a consumer it can be difficult to see the difference in at first at first sight. But of course, sometimes they are delivered at a much lower price, and therefore they create an unhealthy competition.
Well, yes, the fact so these products are basically counterfeit goods, but like I mentioned in the past, they'll change a little part to it and claim that it's IP safe, but it's really not.
Mm,
And
mm,
their overproduction is just it's just not good for any continent.
mm, mm,
Obviously, they can get away with it right now in Europe. I don't know what the
mm.
latest legislature is
I
on
haven't
your.
checked up. I haven't checked up on it, but when we spoke the last time, I checked up on it, and they that the legislation were in motion for doing similar bans like the Americans, but because it's 28 nations, it takes a little bit longer time because we're not like one country, right? So I think that is the status when I checked it up, and I think is it 2-3 months ago we spoke to each other, something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that. So I did see
Mm.
a press release from the EU saying that they're starting to talk about it, and
Okay,
hopefully
okay.
by 2030 it'll be done.
And there will be no printers left, right?
Hopefully
No,
we'll
that
all
was a
be
bad
here
joke.
still.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Herve, the status of the suing the American state. I mean, I guess that it's not the easiest lawsuit to file against America as a nation, right? So, what has it been accepted by court, or is it? And what is the status of that lawsuit right now
So
from
here's what
Ninestar?
here's what happened. About a month ago, Ninestar, their American lawyers were demanding to see basically who the source was of this information. And the judge struck it down to protect the identity of these of the source. So that was a good thing. So then the judge recently asked them to go in mediation, basically try to find a solution and work together. So
But with who?
they asked, well, the judge asked the U.S. government to work with Ninestar
Okay,
to
so they
find.
were like they kind of finding a, let's say, a settlement to whatever situation they
Well,
each
this is
part
just
sees as
basic
part of this.
procedure. It's
Mm, mm,
they're not going to let him back in, but they have to follow the procedure to show that they gave it a chance. And in the
yeah.
meantime, the Ninestar lawyers are making a lot of money doing this in the U.S. So, they love these kind of things where they just drag out and charge, whatever.
Mm, mm,
Also, um, there's something else I wanted to mention. Yeah, so we did send out a letter to the industry, and I sent you a copy of it, uh, uh, having warning the industry and having them contact uh, Homeland Security and telling them not to do any deals or accept any deals with Ninestar
mhm,
because things are going good right now. We don't need them back in. We don't want them back in. And we want our government to work for us. And
mhm.
uh, we want to keep it the way it is.
And that is one of the reasons that I also asked you for this interview, because basically on your website a few weeks ago, I was I was almost shocked when I saw it, because it was a very direct call to action. It says, "Attention, U.S. toner industry, please contact the U.S. government now and tell them not to make a deal with China's Ninestar." And the reason why I mentioned it so directly was also because that of course I understand it from an industry perspective, but I can't help think about that from time to time when you have these direct, let's say, direct call to actions. Now it's good for the toner and the industry that you work in the US, but will it not potentially lead to more protection in a globalization or globalized world that could influence export of American products to the Chinese or to the People's Republic of China? What do you think of that?
I could only
Or you don't
speak.
care about that?
I could only speak for the industry, for my industry.
Mm, mm,
It's our industry to win or lose, and we have to defend it at all costs. I don't know how it works with other stuff. Uh,
mm,
I'm sure the OEMs in our industry are watching these events very carefully,
mm,
and I'm sure they've spoken up to the Homeland Security about it and
mm.
expressed their views too. Honestly, I don't think HP uh, wants Ninestar back in the U.S. No way.
No. Mm. But that is of course very interesting also, because the fact is that if America can create, let's say, an environment where you can keep a Chinese giant manufacturer out of the space and give you, let's say, the opportunity to grow the American industry, it will be interesting to see if this can become like um, an inspiration for other countries. Because I mean, essentially, every nation needs to protect its own business. On the other hand, that is also sometimes what has, opened the world to each other. I mean, you and I, we talk to each other on a 5,000 miles distance. So the globalization has the advantages of getting to know each other and understanding the exchange of culture and goods and businesses. And I think America is maybe, I mean, you are a huge exporter of a lot of goods to the whole world. And I understand that you talk on behalf of of your business and you're part of the industry. But I was just thinking that if it is so easy or so simple to protect industries like the toner recycling business, for example, why is it such a big deal for the legislation not just to say, okay, let's just ban things that harms our industries? I mean, you say they overproduce electrical cars. They basically take parts out of OEMs machines and illegally copy them and make a few changes to the cartridges just to make sure that they are not sued in at the very first moment a chance they have. What is your view on that part?
Um, this has been going on with them for a long time in our industry, in many other industries, and we're just pointing it out in our industry. It's not a level playing field, and
Mm,
Unfortunately for Europe, their legislation takes a long time to get things done. But for here,
mm,
democracy works. Like, for example,
mm,
I sent out an article yesterday about a small town in Michigan that
mm,
ousted every member of the board because they wanted to build a plant in Michigan for a Chinese company who's
mhm,
affiliated with the CCP. So they
mhm,
ousted every members because they were all on the take. They were lobbied and they were probably paid. So now the board, now it's like an empty office. I can send you the video if you want to see it. And they
yeah, I would
ousted.
love to. I saw the article and saw the headline, but I
Yeah, you
didn't
should have
read
watched the
through it.
article.
But
You
yeah,
should have watched the video, by the way. It
yeah,
was,
yeah,
and that's the good thing about American democracy because,
mm,
when we really get down to the nitty gritty, we get it done. There's no
mm,
BS.
mm,
Unfortunately,
mm.
Europe, has to go through 28 countries and it takes too long.
On some matters, at least, not all matters, I would say, but on some matters. And I think actually, if we should talk democracy, I think that the European democracy is quite strong as well. So, but we can strong arm on that one, right?
Yeah, European democracy is good and strong. It's just the
Yeah.
bureaucracy.
Yeah, the bureaucracy, but that is like every time you see something that doesn't add value to a process, basically it's bureaucracy, and I think that nobody really likes it, right? So I get that. So, Herve, when you sent out that let's say letter and that let's say call to action to the industry in America, what was the reactions from the industry, and did you have any reactions from anybody else?
Well, I contacted a couple of news agencies actually this morning who are here in the US, and I'm hoping they're going to run it, like Industry Analysis, which is all American company. I hope they run it. I contacted the imaging channel to get this letter out. I hope they run it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't.
Mm.
Unfortunately, they
See,
rather stay
here is
silent. They rather stay silent and take the Chinese money and then do like nothing happened.
See, here is a small European media actually giving you maybe the first interview about this matter. So don't say that your voice is not heard, even across the world, right?
No, no, I'm not.
So, and what about the industry? I mean, because I mean, one thing is that they see the potential in growth in an American context with this kind of protectionism. But I mean, when you have such direct call to action, do you get like messages back from your readers and your audience saying that okay, this is super good, we will basically support this mission, or what is the reactions on these
The
kind of, let's
reaction,
say, call to action?
yeah, the reaction from our advertisers is really good and strong. In fact, one of our advertisers uh, helped us rewrite the letter and send a better version of it so that people could just, and companies could just sign the bottom, put their company name, and they even verified who to contact at Homeland Security. So the reaction from our advertisers has been really good and strong. I just hope
Mm,
it's just as good as strong from news medias in the industry,
mm.
other news media.
And I don't know the, let's say, the broader media in America, except for the channels that everybody knows. But is it there a general concern in when you look at that, let's say, the news feeds in America? Is a general concern about this trade war? And I also know that Xi Jinping was visiting Biden. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And basically, I don't think that anybody, of course, wants the Chinese American relationship to, let's get into, let's say, war potential situation. But of course, so it needs to be in a friendly position where we still have your, let's say, rules and regulations for what is right and wrong. So will, because one of the things I wrote in the article I wrote about this case, not specifically, yeah, it was actually about the Ninestar thing, was um I was a little bit afraid that it end up in being a political compromise, and then they basically remove the ban and everything will become back to normal because the U.S. trade, American U.S. China's trade will just have to normalize at some point. Is that something that you fear actually, that it will just disappear under the carpet or something like that at some point?
Actually, Z was here last week, met with President Biden, and apparently they hit it off. They had a bromance, and we're going to get some pandas sent back to us, and the U.S. is going to evaluate their trade position. That kind of worried me a little bit,
mm, mm,
but I think, history has shown over the past decade or couple decades what China is capable of. Uh, so I don't know if the trust factor is back. I think certain things will be let in, maybe. A vast majority of it probably won't.
mm.
I don't know. How does your government feel about dealing with the Chinese?
I think it's a good question, and I think it's I was in, as you know, I was in India last week, so I will answer your question in a moment. And I spoke to a guy that believed that when it came to the future of the printing industry, in the professional industry that I'm part of, like let's say the bigger printing companies, right?
Right.
That the Chinese suppliers would be superior and take over most of the markets in the world. And I said I kind of disagree with it for a couple of reasons, and that is because I think the Chinese are pretty good at copying things. And I think also they have a lot of inventions that are on their own properties, of course. But I think the problem is that they don't really understand the Western cultures, and therefore I don't think they can take over as long as they don't have the, at least an understanding of the values that we have, like democracy. We mentioned it a couple of times already, or free speech, or how we actually work together and trade with each other. So my feeling is that China they have huge difficulties right now because of the surplus of housing and surplus of everything they have produced, and the economy is dramatically slowing down in China, which will be a huge problem for them because they have so much debt, basically, right? So what I fear when it comes to what the Danish government and how I think some of the Western countries look at it is basically, 20, 30 years ago, China was seen as almost like a paradise for producing all kinds of goods to the West because it could be done cheap. No regulation on environment, no regulation on labor, no regulations on anything, and we just took everything we could get from there, right? Cheap, make a shitload of money, move on. What has happened is that China, in an economy, has grown a huge middle class, and therefore the Western countries today look more on China as an opportunity to export. So that is a big change. It will still be a manufacturing place, but maybe it's countries like Vietnam and some African countries, maybe India as well, that would be the production spaces like China was 20, 30 years ago. And then the governments, they don't give shit about democracy and just want to sell as much as possible they can to China. And that will probably bring a new level of dependency between the West and the People's Republic of China. And that scares me, to be honest, because basically I think that the only way we can have a proper trade between countries is ensuring that we have democracies as a minimum, right? And that we have democratic values and understanding that the voice of the people should not just be in the name of the country, but should be something that is in the parliament as well, right? That is it's not my government's opinion. It's my opinion mixed a little bit with the reality of what they say.
Well, countries like Vietnam and the Philippines and Thailand uh, are worried about China as well.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Because China is trying to take over the whole region.
yeah,
And so they know they have to have some affiliation with the Chinese, but they're
yeah,
very careful and they're worried and they don't trust them either.
yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, once again, it's all about geopolitical issues,
Politics. Yeah.
which are
Mm.
probably much bigger than the print industry. And
Yeah.
yeah, until we solve the trust factor, until we could really fully trust China, and I don't know if we will,
Mm.
uh, it's going to be difficult. But in the meeting that Biden and Xi had, they had a dinner uh,
Mm.
the same night or the following night, I believe. And executives in the U.S. were paying $40,000 a seat to go have
mm,
dinner with Xi Jinping.
mm,
So, and these are the top companies in the U.S.
mm,
Google and everybody. They were there.
mm,
Google,
mm,
Tesla, Microsoft. So some of us, have this protectionism because our industry is kind of small and we have to have it.
mm,
But
mm,
some people look at it as an opportunity, which is also good. I mean, maybe,
mm,
you know, I think with all the bad, there's always good, or else we wouldn't
mm,
be all
mm,
here. So we have to look at the good and we have to hope for the better all the time.
mm. Um, at some point, I take that the call to action and the ban and the U.S. American Chinese relationship at some point have to, regain the trust that you talk about. And at some point, I also believe that it's important that the world let's move forward, because I mean this stressful situation between nations, especially when it comes to the two biggest nations, when it comes to warfare, right? I think it's very important to find out solutions. I mean, but it seems to me, I listened to actually Xi Jinping's speech to Biden at the first meeting, because there was a nice translation on it, and I think that to some extent, that when it comes to a people's to people's relationship, we are not so different. And the objectives we want, all of us, is basically a better world for our populations, but the means and how we get there are so different. And I was just wondering, I mean, of course, you probably don't have any formula for how we solve that kind of problem, but do you have an idea about the time frame for it?
For having trust, or I'm
For
trying.
having a relationship that is, I mean, I think it will be impossible to have to believe that we will always have a tension among all countries in the world. At some point, it simply has to loosen up in order to be more profitable for all of us, to be more interesting as human beings through that. I was just wondering if you agree on that premises. I was just
Well,
wondering if you think there's a time frame for how long time does it take and what does it take?
I mean, times heals all wounds.
Mm,
That's an old line. And also, our Constitution starts with "we the people." So, we the people, basically, um, we don't want war. We don't want all these issues. But sometimes our governments have to make hard decisions to protect us and to protect
mm,
societies around the world. And it's
agree.
not always fair, but
Mm,
we go about our daily lives, we raise our children, and we don't have time or the necessarily the pleasure to deal with it, in such a geopolitical way. We go forward every day with our work, and
mm,
we
mm,
hope that our government's got our back. So to
mm,
gain the trust of China is going to take a long time. Can
yeah.
it be done? Yes.
Mm,
But I would say the first thing, and this will never happen, but is the Chinese government needs to give their people free speech,
mm,
because
mm,
if the people can't speak and they're speaking for them,
mm,
we'll never get beyond that point.
mm. I agree. And isn't it funny, because when we started talking about this, we started about talking about toners, and we ended on a high note with geopolitical globalization and war games. I mean, that's quite amazing what you can get around with, right, Herve? But I think that what I like about talking to you is that I think the insight, of course, you have from understanding your industry and the needs from what they need in order to thrive is very valuable, and I think it's always important to have different opinions and views and open conversation. And I think this is, and if Xi Jinping watches our channel, right, he should understand that when two people like you and me sit down and talk, it will only enlighten us. I don't think we disagree on very much, but I think that it will enlighten people to talk, and that it shouldn't be so afraid, because most people are relatively sane, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have civil societies for the most part around the world, and for the most part, it's working. So regardless of the political rhetoric, we have hospitals, schools, and fire stations, and it's working. Are we happy with our governments and the things they
Sometimes
do?
we are, sometimes we're not, right?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
there's always an extreme left or right in any government. So, but as long as we got civil societies, we're okay. And as far as us, we're just trying to save what's left of an industry. It seems to be working now that the ban is in place, and we want to keep it going that way.
And just for the audience, just to understand this 100%, I am first of all very happy that you speak out for the industry in the way you do it, and also the call to action. I think it's important that somebody does it and you do it. Thank you for that. And I also think that it's important that for whatever, let's say, selfish reasons, we can have a ban like this. There is also a greater thing, and that is that the ban was imposed because the Chinese government gave slave labor to a lot of businesses in China, which is a violation of human rights, and which is also a very important part of understanding that the democracy is also about protecting our fellow humans, even though they live in China or elsewhere in the world. So, Herve, thank you very much for, again, a wonderful conversation with you. I appreciate your time here, and thank you again. A pleasure.
Well, thank you for having us, and let's hope that people that are enslaved around the world in different countries become free. Let's hope that that life is good for everybody, not just us in the West. And if you could also help us in this call to action and get this letter out and get people to send it to our Homeland Security, we greatly appreciate it, and we appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And thank you for supporting remanufacturing, Mark.
Always. Thank you, Herve.
Thank you.